Productivity versus profitability.
In this segment, we will see how the cultivation of 통일 rice actually contributed to the rural household economy. The profitability of cultivating 통일 rice remains a subject of debate. While the government strongly promoted the high-yield variety, offering guaranteed purchase prices and economic incentives, the actual financial benefits for farmers were harder to evaluate. Various structural factors, including production costs, market dynamics, and government intervention, shaped the economic outcomes of 통일 rice cultivation. At first glance, 통일 rice appeared to be an economically attractive option. It yielded significantly higher output per unit area compared to traditional Japonica rice varieties, and the government's 추국수매 provided assured sales at fixed, above-market prices. These policies were designed to protect farmers from price volatility and encourage widespread adoption of the new variety. However, several challenges complicated this seemingly advantageous arrangement. While many farmers successfully leveraged the high-yield variety to improve their economic standing, a significant number remained reluctant to fully adopt it. The primary reason for this hesitation was the price disparity between 통일 rice and traditional Japonica rice. As of November 1973, the market price of Japonica rice exceeded 10,000 won per 80 kilogram sack or kama, whereas 통일 rice was valued at less than 9,000 won per sack. Additionally, 통일 rice had a lower milling yield, only 60% compared to Japonica rice's 72%, which meant that even if farmers produced the same quality of brown rice, their final marketable yield was lower, effectively reducing their overall income. In response, the government structured 추국수매 to heavily favor 통일 rice, as we saw earlier. By purchasing only 통일 rice and offering above market prices, the state created a dual price system that made government procurement the primary distribution channel for 통일 rice.
High cost of production.
Despite these advantages, several factors continued to undermine the profitability of 통일 rice. High input costs were a persistent concern. The cost of cultivating 통일 rice was substantially higher than that of traditional Japonica varieties. Farmers needed to invest in chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and advanced irrigation techniques, all of which increased production expenses. The government attempted to mitigate this challenge by expanding the supply of nitrogen fertilizers, distributing plastic film for insulated seed beds, and subsidizing agricultural equipment through cooperatives. However, apart from direct subsidies, most of these measures shifted the financial burden onto farmers, increasing their reliance on loans and external credit. Additionally, 통일 rice was more susceptible to cold temperatures and certain diseases, necessitating greater labor and technological intervention to secure stable yields. The preventive measures against those pests also cost extra money and labor. A seemingly minor but significant issue was that 통일 rice straw was unsuitable for traditional craft uses. Unlike the straw of Japonica rice, 통일 rice straw was shorter, more brittle when wet, and poorly suited for making woven straw products. Until the 1970s, rice straw processing was a non-negligible source of off-season income for rural households, as the government purchased traditional straw products such as rice bags and rope for industrial and export use. Concerns were raised even during the initial distribution of Tongil rice, particularly regarding the potential decline in foreign currency earnings from rice straw exports to Japan, specifically for weaving tatami. There were also anecdotal accounts of cattle refusing to eat Tongil rice straw, which affected traditional livestock feeding practices.
Distribution of the rewards.
While the government set higher procurement prices for Tongil rice, not all farmers were able to sell their entire harvest to the state. The procurement system had volume limits, and any surplus that farmers could not sell through 추곡수매 had to be sold on the open market, where Tongil rice was less popular among consumers. Due to its lower stickiness and different texture, Tongil rice was often priced substantially lower than Japonica rice in the commercial market, reducing potential profits for farmers who had excess supply. Moreover, the economic benefits of Tongil rice cultivation were not evenly distributed. Larger landowners and well-equipped farming households were better positioned to absorb the higher input costs and manage risk, whereas the small-scale farmers faced greater financial strain. The necessity of capital-intensive farming methods meant that those without sufficient financial resources or access to modern equipment struggled to maximize productivity. Despite these challenges, many farmers continued cultivating Tongil rice due to government pressure and economic incentives. The government's preferential procurement policies ensured that farmers who adopted Tongil rice gained access to financial support, subsidies, and state-backed loans. Moreover, Tongil rice played a strategic role in achieving national food self-sufficiency, aligning agricultural policy with broader economic development goals.
Cui bono?
The economic concerns surrounding Tongil rice were further highlighted in a 1976 study. The author claimed that increased yields did not necessarily translate into direct economic benefits for farmers due to the lower market price of Tongil rice and reduced byproduct income. The case study also showed that while Tongil rice yielded 32% more grain than Japonica rice per unit area, its lower market price and reduced byproduct income meant that net profits only increased by 23%. Additionally, farmers growing Tongil rice spent 12% more on fertilizers, pesticides, and plastics compared with their counterparts growing Japonica rice. After accounting for these additional expenses, the actual profit margin from Tongil rice was only 6,000 won higher per danbo or 10 airs than that of Japonica rice. It was a mere 10% increase. Although it was a significant and meaningful increase, in reality, it was often offset by debt accumulation from rising production costs. One of the largest points of contention regarding Tongil rice's profitability was the adequacy of government procurement prices. At the time, any kind of organized farmers' movements were prohibited. Official procurement prices were determined solely by government surveys. However, in 1975, the Korean Catholic Farmers Association initiated independent studies on rice production costs for the first time. In its report, the KCFA argued that the government's estimates were significantly lower than actual farming expenses. According to their findings, the average cost of produce 180 kilogram sack of Tongil rice was 24,345 won, while the government's official purchase price was only 19,500 won. This report, which sparked widespread criticism of government-controlled rice pricing policies, marked a significant moment in the history of Korean farmers' activism. Ultimately, the structural challenges of rice pricing were not limited to Tongil rice. Korea's chronic rice shortages had historically inflated rice prices, making the transition to a surplus-based system an economic shock for farmers. By the mid-1970s, record-breaking harvests were recorded year after year, yet farmers found themselves facing declining profitability due to falling market prices. In 1976, when the government's planned rice purchases failed to absorb all Tongil rice production, desperate farmers dumped their rice on the open market at lower prices, which undermined the market stability. The Ministry of Agriculture responded by adjusting its purchase schedule, ordering that December's planned rice purchases be moved up to November to prevent further price collapses. Although the issue of production cost affected both Japonica and Tongil rice farmers, the latter were more vulnerable to price fluctuations, as Tongil rice was highly dependent on government procurement due to lower consumer demand in private markets. As a result, Tongil rice farmers were disproportionately impacted by price instability, reinforcing the perception that, despite its higher yield, Tongil rice was not always an economically viable choice for rural households. It brings to mind the ancient philosophical question of cui bono, or who benefits. By promoting high-yielding varieties, the South Korean government was able to move closer to achieving its goal of food self-sufficiency. However, the farmers who cooperated with this effort found themselves in a peculiar situation. As they worked harder to cultivate their crops and their income increased, so did their farming costs and debts. The temporary alliance between the state and farmers remains uncertain as to how long it can be sustained. Yet South Korean Green Revolution continued to advance.